Kia ora tātou. I have a story for you today about Te Rangakura and Rangahaua, a bicultural teacher training program and a bicultural architectural approach. It's important to note that the paper and the project are collaborative, both in the process that informed them and in this paper, which repeats that process. So the paper, or the full version of it, includes many voices. So the beginning point for this, from my perspective, was a lack of cultural knowledge and cultural authority. I was a relatively new graduate architect, and so I immediately acknowledged the need for active collaboration between myself, the iwi, and the Polytechnic that we were working for. It was an innovative polytech, a community polytech, and it had many emerging programs, including Te Rangakura, which became the first Aotearoa New Zealand accredited Māori Language teacher education program. The images that you see in front of you have the main protagonists. We have Henry Bennett and Morgan Simon, who were the two kamatua. We have John W. Scott, a New Zealand artist and was CEO of the Polytech. We have Michael Payne, also an architect, was chairman of the Polytech Council. And right down in the bottom right-hand corner, you have me as a young fellow. So talking about Te Rangakura, and excuse me, I just need to move some things about. That's better. The context for the project was that in 1991 there were 623 kahanga reo full immersion Māori language preschools in New Zealand, but only 9 kura kaupapa, right? So imagine what that was doing. We have all these fluent speakers going into schools that were ill-equipped to accommodate them. So fluent native speakers could, of course, potentially help, but their generation was aging, they didn't have teacher training, and they were dispersed right through the country. And so this program, to access that Māori cultural knowledge and reduce barriers to Māori teacher training, was launched. And it was a satellite program that was taught in Marae and also at this central place, Rangahaua, that we were involved in creating. So importantly, the whole program occurred in a week, right? It occurred ahead of all the bureaucratic things that prevent things happening, because there was a real appreciation of the need for speed. And Henry had the way of drawing together Māori academics, the 3 Whanganui iwi, the Trust Board, the Polytech Management and Council, all the people that he needed to get this happening. Remembering at the time that, excuse me, the New Zealand Teachers Colleges were the only accredited Māori language teacher training organisations, and they were perceived to be not doing well. So this holistic approach to Māori education involved education in both culture and in language through all ages, and integrated with whānau in a home marae. And the central staging point for that was Rangahaua. And this is our development plan for the campus. You also see down bottom left what the immediate context for the project was. A whole lot of little houses and sheds which were being very effectively used actually by the existing program. Minor conflict began immediately where the Polytech management wanted to locate the facility right in the centre of the campus, with the idea that it would somehow represent how important it was. But of course, that would have smothered the program and forced a kind of assimilation. Whereas on the edge of the campus where they had been, it facilitated a whole lot of kind of semi-related things to happen, which we'll talk about later. So we negotiated our way through that. Rangahaua, the place, was designed and built 2 years ahead of the government approvals. The Polytech paid for it out of cash flow. They said, no, this is too important. We can't wait for an approval that will maybe one day come. By the way, it never did. The design plan document is only in Māori language. It's designed as a table plan to be worked around, and its exclusive use of Māori language occurred through, again, this collaborative process. We don't have time really to critique and talk through the design and its plans, but there are many aspects of it that speak of the different way that it operated. The brief, by the way, was for 4 classrooms. Rangahaua was also to be distinctly and recognisably Māori in terms of its architectural expression. And this would occur directly through reference to the traditional marae, seen by the client group as the primary authoritative and authentic source of Māori architectural culture. This was really hard for me. I was a new grad. I was very familiar with Rawi Thompson's work, who had tutored us at Auckland. I'd had Dr. Mike Austin teaching me when I was there. But the clients were very clear. And I remember Morven standing there with his arms outstretched and said, no, it must have that traditional marae form. And so I had to work with that, and that's what we did. Design. They could use the facilities for pretty much anything they liked, as long as it didn't bring the Polytechnic into disrepute. A great many things happened there at Rangahaua, and many of them kind of marginally associated with the Polytech system. It was to be neutral space, hospitality space, a space for people to stay, to expand, contract, to accommodate everyone and everything that may be required. It really abstracted the architectural concept did, a traditional marae structure as a single building. So the normal marae complex was compressed down into this one building. And there was lots of really careful negotiation about that and discussion. It took quite a while, and it was discussion with big groups, including representation from all iwi. Construction and opening. The Māori concept and values also underpinned the construction. A Māori stone from the Whanganui River was placed under the building foundations towards the excavation, towards the end of excavation. And traditional protocols excluding female visitors to the site during construction were immediately contentious. Without going too deeply into it, it was updated. Contractors also had some female contractors who were allowed to work on site. So it was part of the client brief, really, and it was important to the client group. However, one of the Polytech council members, female council member, really considered this to be a sexist protocol and to have no place at all in a contemporary educational institution. So she deliberately broke the protocol. and that caused immeasurable hurt, really immeasurable hurt. And it resulted in the Maori stone being dug up and returned to the river. The mahi and amo, that framed the central courtyard space would no longer be erected. And so the building as completed, looked as you see it there. I'm going to skip through the design itself. You can see the different views moving around. This is the main courtyard space. And here we have the kitchen. One of the things that I can say is that it threw my understanding of educational institutions on its head, because really it was primarily a place of Māori hospitality and welcome before it was an educational institution. So this kitchen was actually the most important place. This kitchen was where everybody would come and sit down and have hospitality before they would meet or greet or do anything else. So the idea that a reception and so on would be important. Here's the wharikai, also used for various teaching, lots of different sorts, including particularly flax and weaving. Here is the runanga room, which also operated as 2 classrooms. You see it down on the right, split. Particularly for language teaching, people sat on the floor. So, yeah. This is a quote from Morven Simon. With its own Te Kahangareo, run by national identities Piki and Te Oti Waratini, we had a living marae, particularly as Te Rangakura satellites commenced sending their students to Rangahaua for training. It was an awesome buzz at the flush, cultural teams practicing, choirs training, mahi hakina limbering up, Tai Chi students stretching, haka booming across the yard, kuraka papa singing, Ngāpuna Waihanga weaving, painting and carving, Uncle Dave Teki running staff meetings, Judd Bailey mastering his craft in bone and stone, flat guitars gasping for air, Janet learning her latest opera piece, Rangakura students being distracted by the pottery, Marilyn with a floor full of Te Atarangi students, my wife Kura with her catering team preparing the daily cafe menu, Karanga girls expanding their lungs, Tipi and Mohi honing the art of oratory, Brendan Pukatapu talking modems, Kohango primary and secondary buses coming and going. Incredible but true. It was absolutely tumeki. It was a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation. There was always people there, and there was people living there. It was a true living marae. Within 8 years, to a student population of 600 across 25 outposts throughout New Zealand. And by 1998, it was the largest Maori teaching training provider in the 150-year modern-day history of Aotearoa. 2 major events in the life of Rangahaua are particularly memorable. The first of these was the first formal graduation of students from the Te Rangakura program in '96. Marilyn Vreda noted that the Māori, the life force, built up over time and had a physical feel instilled by the people passing through. And in preparation for that event, the mahi and amo of the whare were installed as originally designed. And the former head of the Politic, John Scott, was invited to come and open the newly installed entrance. The second major event was the death and mourning of Kamatua Henry Bennett in 1998, where the family had the honour of being invited to have Henry lay in state at Rangahaua before being taken to Kaiwi Marae for the tangi. It was extraordinary. The sunset. These images are of Motua Gardens, Pakaitore, and the same people were involved in both Rangahaua and the celebration that was had here at Pakaitore. And so Rangahaua had a period of growth and flowering before falling from grace as part of a Labour government rationalisation of the tertiary education sector. The same thing's happening again. And it resulted in the closure of the community-based polytechnic, which, when you look back, seems such an extraordinary thing to do. Many of the people involved in Rangahaua consider that it was payback for Motua Gardens. Rangahaua was an active living marae that coexisted within a tertiary educational institution. It is like a marae and served as a marae. It references architectural history, yet is contemporary and has a practical education function. It has beautiful design lines and a sensitive relation to its landscape. It's not tucked away in a corner of a campus. It has a large artia space in front, giving an appropriate prominence. That was a quote from John Scott. Rangahaua was the precursor also for Pukenga at Unitec, and interestingly, Pukenga was briefed to be not a marae like Rangahaua. Rather, it was conceived as a Māori education workplace, exemplifying Māori knowledge as a teaching tool through its architecture. So we were commissioned to do this in association with Rewi, and Rewi was the design lead on the project. But it's interesting because 15 years later, and here's a quote from Deirdre Brown, the centrality of the marae as a cultural symbol and ritual space remains an important concept to this day, as demonstrated with Pukenga being recently joined 15 years after its opening by Lionel Grant's Meeting House. And so this idea somehow that the marae and the functioning of a marae might have a relevance within a tertiary institution. Morven, at the opening of Rangahaua, described it as a new waka, a new vehicle to take us on a journey from where we are to where we're going. And that's exactly what happens there. These photos of Rangahaua are recent ones, and you'll see that the mahi and amo have come down. They've come down for maintenance. This is now the home of the Tupoho Whanau Trust, and so there is a new life coming there. It was created by an architectural and management process that empowered Māori, the architect operating as a aligned other, and the politic operating in genuine partnership mode. And this gave space for this kind of deep diversity of activity and protocol necessary for a holistic Māori environment to occur. And for this to be seen not as peripheral, but actually as a core part of the educational service delivery. It also gave space for the architecture to be actively informed by the client group in a participatory model, and with the client group's specialist cultural expertise dominating. Our role here is ambiguous, mediating and giving form and space to group intentions through discursive development. And it results in a blended authorship with the client group and Māori architecture through Māori community without access to a Māori architect. This is our final slide, and I'd like to finish with a quote from Mary Bennett, Uncle Henry's son. Rangahaua was born by Māori, not for Māori, and that is different. Te Rangakura was not just about a Brown teacher training program. It was also fundamentally different. Rangahaua is about the people, it just is. There is no question when you are here, everybody knows it. It's Māori space. People have a tremendous pride in being part of it. So that finishes the presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions that people have. I would also say there's the full version of the paper is really fleshes a lot of that out, and kind of there's a very, I think, important discussion to be had about the nature of the space itself. That quote from Mary for me is really fantastic, because it what it does is it suggests, oh, what is it that's different about this? Yeah, so that kind of analysis will actually show that it is quite different space too, in the way it's formed and the way it operates particularly.
Thank you, Mark. That was fantastic. If you can give Mark a virtual clap using the clap icon on the right hand side. So
I've never come across that.
Please do give him a virtual clap. Oh, there we go.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you very much. That was fascinating. And I had a question or two up my sleeve just listening to you, but I will let others ask their questions first. So can we go with Regan to start with?
Kia ora, Mark. Fantastic presentation. It sounds like it was a really incredible journey, and you're so fortunate to be able to look back on it. But looking back on it now, what's the main thing that you remember? What's the main feeling or the main sense that you take from that experience that you had? Because it was it wasn't just solely architectural that you engaged with.
Yeah, I guess Rangahaua was a very warm place. It was a place of warm welcome. I was welcomed really as part of the whānau, and adopted as part of the whānau, I would say. Well, I know that. I know that. And so there's something about the way it operates that is fundamentally different to a normal tertiary institution. And I've tried to hint at that. A lot of the things that occurred there wouldn't be able to occur at VUW, for instance. You know, there were two kahunga reo at one time, also operating there at one time. You know, they would just shift, and the reason that happened was because they were also facilitating the emergence of other Māori educational institutions, but they also saw them as being fundamental to what they were doing. So even though they were tertiary, they saw kahunga reo as a part of what they were doing, an important part of what they were doing, not different, not separate. It's the same with the kura. So there was these relationships that were developed throughout the region, that people were coming and going as this hub, really. I would describe it as, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, Regan. So,
No,
but for me, I was always sensitive to the culture. I had the huge benefit of being taught by Mike Austin. So, and I was in Brick's studio with him as well. So I had that sensitivity. I knew Railway through tutoring as well. So yeah, it was a great opportunity. And for a start, for me as a young architect, I was very ambitious. It was a little frustrating, I guess. Yeah, but looking back, I did have the humility to work things through and show the alternatives and respect my lack of cultural knowledge. You know, for instance, when the client group said, no, we will have no black. No black colour. Nowhere. Black is dead. And that was the position they took. And that's what happened. And there are a great many decisions all the way through that were done in this interactive manner. Yeah.
Well, one of the big things that I noticed, because I know Pukenga quite well because from Unitec.
Yes.
Part of the architectural language that that you used
yes.
on this marae seems to be courtyards, and that the linkages between inside and outside
yes.
are a lot more delicate than Pukenga is. You know,
yes.
it's quite
yes.
brutal, and you know, either
yes.
in or out. But your one tends, and it's got that lovely courtyard. It's got the lovely walk around, and I don't know. Any comments, Mark, or just looking at the pictures, I can sense how the architecture made quite a bit of difference in this place compared certainly to Pukenga.
Yes. Well, this place literally influenced Pukenga. When I say that we worked on Pukenga, we did. Like it was a joint collaboration with Railway, although it's never ever credited. So this literally shaped it, and there was kind of a reaction against it in a way. There was a reaction against its Marae-ness, the fact that it was just this almost unruly at times hub of activity, right? There was a sense that no, actually that didn't quite fit with the sort of tertiary institution and the relationship they had there. It also really affected it in that Pukenga is a far more narrative architecture. And so there are these wonderful series of stories woven into it. And here, the client group literally didn't want that. And that, for a start, seems very unusual. Why would they not want that? They were very sensitive to the other marae. Uncle Henry did not want to compete with the mana of other marae, right? So whereas the Māori-ness was important, right? Deliberately, the mahi were not carved except their fingers, right, at the very end, right? And the patterning that was introduced throughout, that was based on those two beautiful artworks by Bob Yankee, who one of which hangs within Rangahaua, and the other of which was gifted to Michael Payne on his retirement from the Polytechnic by the people. So, yeah, very different. Yeah. So, and again, I think that quote by Morven says a lot. The idea of the waka, it was what it would do was more important, was most important, right? And yeah. There are some really unique things about it. As a tertiary institution, I remember the property manager just tearing his hair out about it, you know, because it was unruly. The design is unruly. It's got 16 or 18 outside doors or something, right? So people can come and go and shift and move through it in ways that typically doesn't happen within a tertiary institution.
Can I ask a bit more about that, Mark? Because when you were talking, you said something like, "Oh, this couldn't have happened at Victoria University."
Did I say that?
I think so.
I didn't specifically mean to make an example of us or suggest that we were we were not. But I think in any institution, it didn't really happen at Unitec either, right? You see, and in fact, they reacted against it, almost as if this multiple programming, I would call it, and this merging of the educational program and a more general, Marae-based activity.
Sure. I was more meaning, I wasn't meaning that you were being critical. I was more meaning that that it would be quite hard to imagine a Victoria University Architecture School with kids running around and
exactly. Exactly.
But actually, over the last few weeks, when we've been in lockdown, it's actually been really lovely to see kids kind of hanging off people's shoulders and sort of running in and yelling mummy or daddy or whatever. And I've really liked seeing that kind of, that sort of humanity, the way that people are actually human, and you know, that we don't tend to kind of appreciate, I guess, in the actual kind of physical context of the architecture school. And I wondered whether you had any thoughts about whether how in the new design of the school you might bring at least some principles of that of what you've learnt and what has happened in this space to our school.
Yeah, well, the sorts of things that would start to happen is things that the institution would see as peripheral would become more central. There would be an early childhood education centre within the space. Why would that be? It's so that people aren't so far from their children. You know, students often have children too. Academics have children. And the difference it makes, I know at places like the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Environment, which has an early childhood education centre in its base, exactly for those same reasons, right, as a support service for staff. So there could be things like that, and the focus on the social and hospitality, right? So that when you bring guests, where do you take them? You know, at the moment, there's that question in terms of Māori protocol, where do we take them? And for staff anyway, and students won't really be quite so aware of this, but we're not very well served by staff facilities here. So it's not so easy to give people for hospitality. We tend to do it out across the road in cafes somewhere. Yeah.